Welcome to the Workbench and welcome to another episode of Wheels Wings TV. We have the latest iteration of Airfix's 1/72nd scale Mark 10 Beaufighter. Let's have a look. First sprue, we've got our two fuselage halves, our rudder, they seem to be ailerons, looks like landing gear covers, got our pilot and our air gunner, who are actually rather nicely molded. This guy here's a little soft, but this one here looks quite good. And we got a bunch of launching rails for our rocket projectiles, along with the reinforcing plates that they mounted to the wing. Panel lines are width-wise very nice, maybe a bit deep, but definitely not trenches. That looks quite nice. A little bit of roughness around the cockpit there. We can clean that up. Whole bunch of interior structure. I don't know why they would really waste the time doing all of that, because you're not gonna see any of it, but I suppose they have their reasoning. Maybe just to add extra strength to the fuselage halves, but they're trying to represent the aircraft structure. I don't know why you'd bother. Nice subtle fabric texture on the rudder and the ailerons. It's always nice. Some big old ejector pins on the inside of our landing, well, I guess those are landing gear doors, so that'll have to be filled if you're doing wheels down. Rocket rails look to be pretty good. A little bit of a mold line down the middle we'll have to take care of. But yeah, those panel lines look really nice. I don't mind when they're deep, because you don't have to worry about filling them with paint. But when they're wide, they look really bad. But these are nice and narrow and very much to my liking. We've got our lower fuselage with the cannon ports, the ejection ports. Cannons are molded closed, but a quick little attack with a drill bit and we can open those up. Got our main wheels with separate hubs. That's going to make painting those a little bit easier. Our nose cone, some of our various intakes. Got our actual rocket projectiles. Those look like they're the standard 60-pound high explosive variant. Be the same ones on the you'd see on the Typhoons. Got our engine cowlings with the cooling fins open. We got our Bristol Hercules radial engines that are a little basic looking. The Bristol engines didn't have the same amount of cooling fins that you'd see on your American, like Pratt & Whitneys and Wright Cyclones, but that still seems a little basic. But they're buried in the cowlings there, so should be just good enough, if not just fine. Of course, have our exhaust collector ring. It was something unique the British did. The exhaust was always directed forward to the cowl ring and then out the side. And these were usually characteristically like a tarnished metal finish. Looks like we have the cockpit, or the interior floor. Once again, nice, deep, but very narrow and sharp panel lines. I really like that. That looks very nice. And looks like the front of our vertical tail. You have the option of just the straight tail or the one with the extended dorsal fin. That looks good. We've got our tail planes. We've two different tail planes. Aside from this little fairing here, going to the trim tabs, I don't know enough about the Beaufighter to really tell you what the difference is there, but nice fabric tech detail here. More of those nice sharp panel lines. Wouldn't mind seeing them a little bit deeper along the hinge line, but we can always deepen that ourselves. And of course, in the Beaufighter, they had an anhedral. Sorry, dihedral. Dihedral goes up, anhedral goes down. The very first Beaufighters, it was a completely horizontal tail. So we got some stub wing spars. We got our propellers, and those look really good. Nice detail around the hub. Blades look commendably thin. Tail wheel, gonna assume deployed and retracted. Some cockpit details, some air intakes. We got our torpedo, their propellers, main landing gear struts, pilots and gunner seat. We got our porcupine exhausts. These were flame dampening, so you didn't see a big blue flame out the back end. Browning machine gun for the rear. Control yoke. Pitot tube. Rudder pedals. Radio antenna. Looks pretty good. A little soft between the wheel and the hub, but not too bad. Those propellers look really good. And we got our wings, and I assume these are the inserts for the tail planes. Once again, more of those nice, deep but narrow panel lines. I really like that. Got our ejection ports for our 303 machine guns and the outer wings. Beaufighter had 4 20mm cannons on the bottom of the fuselage and 6 303s in the wings, and because of the landing light, 2 in one wing and 4 in the other. I believe the Australian variants swapped those out for 4 50 cal machine guns, so that would be a lot of firepower. Wheel well has a little bit of detail in it, a little bit of riveting or Zus fasteners, I suppose, around the engine cowling. Nice sharp trailing edges. Those look really nice. And we got a drop tank. We've got the extended vertical tail. Another alternate tail wheel, I suppose. Optional spinners for the propellers. That the thimble radome nose, which you saw in some. And looks like bomb racks, perhaps. Once again, our extended dorsal fin. That looks pretty good. And we got our clear parts. Just grab our... A little bit of distortion, definitely on the observer's dome. Cockpit's not too bad, so you should be able to see whatever detail you put in there. To be pretty clear, little bit of cobwebbing on the one side here. which unfortunately there's nothing we can do about. Framing looks a little bit soft, so it might be definitely take our time masking that off. We've got our leading edge landing lights, observers, domes, a little bit of distortion in those, or like texture, I guess would be the right word. Not perfectly clear. There's a little bit of a texture. It's not completely smooth. Of course, you have the flush fitting one, and then the later style where you can mount a machine gun. And wingtip lights. Yeah. Not the best, but better than some. And our decals. Airfix, so cartograph decals. Going for a little bit, not quite a super glossy finish, but not matte either, so those would be nice. We've got 404 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force, and we've got B Squadron of the Portuguese Air Force. I did not know the Portuguese had Beaufighters. I guess Portuguese Navy, I would assume, with the anchors. Decals look good. Hardly any clear around the insignias, and even the letters where there's a lot of clear, it's very tight around the letters, so not a lot of extra, so lesser chance of part silvering. This big piece here, you'd probably want to trim out some of the clear in the middle, or at least poke some holes so you get your setting solution underneath. Instrument panel, typical Airfix, high contrast affair. Various stencils, which are all actually legible, even at that size. So definitely be worth putting those on, at least where you can see them. Yeah, those look pretty good. If you were doing the Portuguese one, I would be tempted to mask and paint the tail instead of trying to get these decals to perfectly match up. But you just have to make sure you match the red to the red in the insignia. Oh, those should behave themselves just fine. And our instructions, the usual historical blurb, safety briefing, and the important parts. We got our spars attached to the floor. Got our pilot. Goes in his seat, just mounts to these plugs on the wing spar. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I guess we're not seeing it. So rudder bars, control column, the observer's seat position, consoles for the cockpit. We got our tail wheel in the stowed and the deployed positions. Got our instrument panel, our decal. Two halves go together. Okay, yeah, fuselage halves go together, and the cockpit and the interior goes in from the bottom, which we then cover with the bottom of the fuselage. If you're mounting the torpedo and/or mounting on a stand, you've got some various holes to open up before you install this piece. We've got our wings, more holes if you're planning on mounting the rockets, more holes to open up. Looks like this little bump on the wing needs to be removed. So it's probably a variant specific piece. Opposite wing, once again, remove this little bump, drill your holes for your rockets. Wing slides down over the spar, so you should have a nice secure join there. Opposite wing. We've got our ailerons going into place, and if you did want to pose them, they give you the maximum deflection. And of course, make sure that they are opposite. We've got our tail planes, and that's going to be dictated by our decal options. And that goes onto the tail. Once again, the fixed part of the vertical tail, dependent on our marking options with the dorsal fin, rudder, and I'm sure you could probably pose the rudder deflected if you wished. Got our engines, front and rear halves go together. Cowling broken into 3 pieces. The exhaust collector ring, the exhaust pipe. You'd probably want to leave the collector ring off until after main painting so you can get that nice tarnished metal finish. And of course, both engines are identical, so you just do everything twice. A different nose cone for depending on your variant. Air intakes above I guess that'd probably be the carburetor intakes above the engine. Different depending on which marking option you're going with. So right from the start, pick which paint scheme you're going with and mark it as such as you go along so you don't get the wrong pieces. Undercarriage covers for in-flight. Wheels. If the hub has to go in with the tires, I don't see the point of making that its own separate piece because that's not going to aid your painting any. Landing gear legs and other structure goes in. The retraction pieces, so that should be nice and strong. Just be careful when you're popping the wheel in, you don't break anything. Of course, the wheels do have a flat spot, so make sure you don't glue those until you have it sitting on its wheels so everything lines up. Rinse and repeat for the opposite side. Got our torpedo. Definitely want to make sure you take care of that seam line because these were usually in a metal finish. At least the body would be metal and the warhead would usually be painted. Got our rockets and our rails. Nice to see those molded separately. So you can perhaps even have the rails fitted without the rockets as if it just returning from a mission or about to be loaded up. If you could find a ground crew set, you could probably even have a little airfield scene. Now, I assume this is torpedo or rockets. I can't say if you would be carrying both. I believe usually you'd have some Beaufighters would carry torpedoes, others for flak suppression would carry the rockets. I don't think you would carry both. Torpedo itself was 1,800 pounds, so that's really going to cut down on your speed. So you might want to do a little bit of research on Beaufighter armament, whether you could have both of these mounted or one or the other. And that whole assembly goes onto the wing. I would be tempted to mount the plate to the wing and then paint up all the rockets and mount them later. So I would assume that would be the same color, or that could be wingtip lights, landing light, and you want to glue those in, make sure those are fitted in nice and flush. Pitot tube, windscreen. Looks like both options are using the later style observer's dome with the machine gun. option B has this little dingus above and behind the cockpit. Propellers with their axles, which goes in. Okay, that's interesting. And then option B has the spinners for the propellers. And your Beaufighter is done. So, first paint scheme, 404 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force, Cornwall, England, June 1944. So we've got our iconic invasion stripes. And they actually give you dimensions for the stripes at scale, so you can get those masked and painted. As you can see, not on the decal sheet, so you do have to paint these yourself. Typical extra dark sea gray over sky. Torpedo is gray with dark sea gray warhead, although in some pictures these seem like just left in metal, so maybe consult some references. Rockets are calling out for just a dark green. Once again, usually you see a metal body with the warhead painted, so consult references for that one as well, I would say. But yeah, nice to see Canadian content in these kits. The other option, something definitely lesser known. Squadron B of the, I guess, Naval Aviation, Lisbon, Portugal, 1946, or right after the war. Britain and Portugal have had a many centuries-long alliance, so it wouldn't be not surprising that Portugal was given some military aid from England. Once again, extra dark sea gray over sky, so same paint scheme, different markings. Once again, I would be tempted to mask and paint the rudder instead of getting those decals to meet all the way around. But shouldn't be any issue, and of course, we're definitely going to be doing the Canadian one. So, the Airfix 1/72nd scale Beaufighter Mark 10. This kit's a couple years old now. This is the most recent boxing, and of course giving the Royal Canadian Air Force a little bit of love, which is always a great thing. Very nice looking kit. Very much in love with those panel lines. Deep, but not wide. Very much in scale looking. You can hose the paint on and not worry about filling in the panel lines, and they don't look like the Western Front. Definitely going to be excited to do this one. Just finished reading a book on the Beauforts of Coastal Command, and of course all of those squadrons eventually went on to fly Beaufighters. So if you'd like to see a full build review of this kit, leave me some nice comments down below. And if so, make sure you have subscribed if you haven't already so you don't miss it. Thank you very much. I'll catch you next time.